Welcome to Crossroads, a show by the Epoch Times where we bring you insights beyond the headlines. Now, as always, don't forget to hit the like button, helps us reach more people. Now, a Florida plan has been created, and it's actually happening. They're calling it the Alligator Alcatraz. And this isn't just some random name. This has actually been approved by the Department of Homeland Security. Now, this is going to be a faculty in the Florida Everglades to hold and detain illegal immigrants. Now, Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier, he gave an official announcement on it. Let me show you what he said. Watch this.
Attorney General James Uthmeier here at the Miami-Dade Collier training facility. This is an old, virtually abandoned airport facility right in the middle of the Everglades. Florida's been leading on immigration enforcement, supporting the Trump administration and ICE's efforts to detain and deport criminal aliens. The governor tasked state leaders to identify places for new temporary detention facilities. I think this is the best one. As I call it, Alligator Alcatraz. This 30 square mile area is completely surrounded by the Everglades. Presents a efficient, low-cost opportunity to build a temporary detention facility because you don't need to invest that much in the perimeter. If people get out, there's not much waiting for them other than alligators and pythons. Nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Within just 30 to 60 days after we begin construction, it could be up and running and could house as many as 1,000 criminal aliens. This presents a great opportunity for the state of Florida to work with Miami-Dade and Collier counties. Alligator Alcatraz, we're ready to go.
Interesting plan. Little security needed, right? Nobody's going to get out because nobody wants to get out. In my opinion, look, if someone can survive like a week in the Florida Everglades, they kind of earned it. You know, if I go to like Home Depot and there's a guy out there saying, hey, let me mow your lawn, I survived a week against alligators and, pythons, I'm hiring him personally. Now, on this note, though, it's interesting because there were actual memes going around a while back saying that if Trump got into office, they were saying Republicans were planning to have things like moats to help protect the border, and they wanted to put alligators in them, like a big alligator moat along the border. Well, we all thought it was a joke. It seems like Florida could kind of make that a reality, at least with the holding facilities, a big holding facility with a large number of alligators guarding it. Now, look, in other news, the Supreme Court has now given the Trump administration to green light, basically green lighting the ability to ship illegal immigrants basically anywhere. They no longer need to be sent back to their home countries, and that could potentially allow them to be sent to just drop-off countries, like a common drop-off point. Foreign prisoners, they could be sent to El Salvador. They could be sent anywhere that's just maybe a little more convenient. Maybe if their own countries won't take them back, they could just drop them off somewhere else. Politico said this: the Supreme Court on Monday cleared the way for the Trump administration to swiftly deport foreigners to countries where they have no previous ties. It says the justices lifted an order from a federal judge in Boston who had placed restrictions on the deportations to those countries. It notes that U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy had issued a nationwide injunction that required the administration to give immigrants, quote, meaningful advance notice and a chance to raise objections before they are sent to so-called third countries, nations not specified in their original deportation orders. What does that mean? You got to tell them that what's happening, and you have to let them have due process, meaning every illegal immigrant who's going to be deported, they can challenge it in court. If you have 10 million of them, 20 million of them, that might take, 10, 20, 30 years, who knows. But the Supreme Court right now, they granted the Trump administration's emergency request to put Murphy's injunction on hold. Not fully over with, but the injunction to put things on hold is now on hold. And this is what they said, quote, fire up the deportation planes. That's a exact quote from Tricia McLaughlin, a spokeswoman for the Department of Homeland Security, saying in a statement celebrating the ruling. Fire up the planes because they're going somewhere. It might not be where you came from, but they're going somewhere. Now, some people, they like to accuse Americans of not being able to find, their countries on a map. They're saying, I come from X country. And Americans will often say, well, I've never heard of that country. Well, Now other people will get to experience the lack of American knowledge of geography in practice as we send them to countries they didn't come from. Now, there were reports that a district court judge in Boston was actually planning to defy the Supreme Court order also. Homeland Security advisor Stephen Miller, he commented on this earlier this week on Fox News' Hannity. Here's what he had to say.
Yes, this is an incredible victory, the Supreme Court win. It allows President Trump, as the law has long said, but the courts have blocked, it allows President Trump to send illegal aliens convicted of rape, murder, homicide, assault, battery, crimes against children to any country around the world that is willing to accept them. So whether that be South Sudan, or whether it be Somalia, or whether it be Ethiopia, any country in the world that is willing to accept these monsters, we can get them out of our country and be free of them forever. The only thing I have to share tonight, Sean, in a little bit of breaking news, is that the district court judge in Boston has said he's going to defy the Supreme Court's ruling. So expect fireworks tomorrow when we hold this judge accountable for refusing to obey the Supreme Court.
Meanwhile, U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, they've set off concerns about Iranian sleeper cells. And people are wondering, well, are there terrorists in our own backyards? Interestingly, not long after all this happened, in fact, almost immediately after, the Department of Homeland Security announced that ICE agents just arrested 11 illegal immigrants from Iran. This is the announcement from Department of Homeland Security. They say over the weekend, ICE arrested 11 Iranian nationals illegally in the United States. Under Secretary Noam, DHS has identified and arrested known or suspected terrorists and violent extremists that illegally entered this country, came in through Biden's fraudulent parole programs or otherwise. And it notes, we have been saying we are getting the worst of the worst out, and we are. We don't wait until a military operation to execute. They did in this case, but it's beside the point. And they add, quote, we proactively deliver on President Trump's mandate to secure the homeland. On that point, they also posted a photo of one of the guys they arrested, and they have his shirt pulled up, and he has a gun stuck in his belt. And they posted that not only is he lucky that, he's lucky we arrested him and the gun didn't go off, suggesting he didn't shoot himself in the groin. Now, look, the allegations on this are pretty serious with some of the cases. One of the guys they arrested was allegedly an Iranian military sniper. I mean, technically not still in service, but do we really know? This was CBS on some of that.
ICE officials have arrested 11 Iranian nationals spanning 8 states nationwide. Among them, 5 possessed previous criminal convictions. Their crimes ranging from grand larceny to drug and firearm possessions. Also among those apprehended, Ribbar Karimi. While arresting him in northern Alabama, ICE officials say they found his Islamic Republic of Iran Army identification card and allege he served as an Iranian sniper between 2018 and 2021.
Now, that story is actually getting some extra attention also because there is concerns over whether Iran has sleeper cells in the United States. Does Iran have sleeper cells? Does it have terror networks, maybe assassins who can cause issues here? The short answer to that is yes, absolutely they do. In fact, right here in New York City, you might remember there were stories going around. There were Iranian agents trying to have assassinations on American soil. In fact, people were arrested for it. Right here in New York City, an alleged Iranian agent was accused of trying to hire a gang. It was an Eastern European mafia to carry out an assassination on a critic of the Iranian regime, a journalist. And so absolutely there are cases like this. Similar cases in Washington, D.C. During the Trump campaign, when he was on the campaign trail, you might remember Donald Trump was briefed on allegations that Iran had a hit out on him. There were allegations that during the campaign trail, Iran was trying to assassinate one of the leading candidate in the American elections. And so, yes, they have cells here. Aside from that, because that would be your assassins and your direct special agents, there's also just your normal sleeper agents and terrorists and so on. Also on that point, the cartels have very deep ties to Hezbollah. Hezbollah, of course, being a terrorist organization with, again, basically controlled by Iran. They're very heavily active in Latin America. Most of the cartels will have some ties to Hezbollah. Now, without a doubt also, there have been problems of so-called gotaways. And, you know, we hear a lot about facilitated mass migration programs. The whole process where they download the CBP-1 app, or used to, they schedule entry into the United States, hand themselves over, and they get access to all our wonderful social programs like free housing and free food. There were other groups with that called gotaways, and those were people who, you know, for some reason chose to try to avoid the authorities. And, you know, risks or not, a lot of those people would at least be on the books when it comes to, like, you know, imagine an individual wants to schedule entry into the U.S. There's clear benefits for doing it. There's some risk to it, but you're going to be on the books if you do it. But, you know, maybe an even bigger issue with legal immigration to the United States over the years are the people who flew under the radar, the people who had to be smuggled in, those who avoided the normal migrant routes for one reason or another. Those are your gotaways. And Epoch Times actually has had reporting, including video footage on the border of several of these individuals who look like Middle Eastern men. And we have footage, we've published stories on it over the years, Middle Eastern men being escorted by large groups of armed cartel members. And they don't do that for just anybody. You know, think 5 or 6 cartel members, guns, on horseback, and they drop off one guy into the United States. That's not normal. But there have been many cases like that, recorded, documented, and so on. And look, also speaking of unaccounted for people, members of the Trump administration, they've been raising concerns over what happened to all the children who came in as part of the mass illegal immigration programs. I'll be talking more about what happened to these kids after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, 2 precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. If you're just joining in, support us and independent journalism by hitting the like button, subscribe to Crossroads, and also let me know what you think in the comments. Now, look, speaking of unaccounted for people, members of the Trump administration, they've been raising concerns over what the heck happened to all the kids who came in as part of the mass illegal immigration programs and then were lost. In fact, about 350,000 of them unaccounted for. That's a lot of kids to lose. And there have been some shocking information coming out on just where exactly they were sent. HHS Secretary RFK Jr., he just came out and raised this during a recent hearing. Watch this.
One of the major reason that the Biden administration lost track of all those children is because they were emphasizing speed over security. And there were political reasons for that. They wanted to get the kids out of U.S. custody, so they were handing them off to anybody. They didn't require background checks. They didn't require identification even. I've watched horror stories of the same person picking up child after child after child, using different names and different addresses. One of the addresses was a strip club. One of the addresses was a parking lot. One of the addresses was an empty lot that was filled with shipping containers. And this character was getting all these kids. One person got 42 kids to one address. What we're doing now is DNA testing on every sponsor. We're doing personal identification. We're doing background checks, and we're doing income verification.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Jeez, imagine that, right? Orphan kids being sent to an empty parking lot. You send a kid to an empty parking lot, where did they go? Where was there a house somewhere around there, somewhere nearby? If it was an empty parking lot, where could they possibly stay, right? How could something like that possibly happen? You can send a kid to a home and there's no home there. What about sending an orphan kid to a strip club? Nice little place to stay, little Jimmy. Could they even get in if they were under 18 years old? Well, I don't think so, right? What could have happened to that kid? Fair questions to ask, right? Now, there are ongoing calls for answers on what happened to all of those missing kids. Again, over 300,000 unaccounted for. They're saying we're going to get answers on it. They're investigating it. And look, so far, we don't really know what happened to them. I do think it's interesting that RFK is saying that at the very least, they're looking into it and they're now putting systems in place to actually check who the people are trying to get these kids. Making sure you track them and make sure the kids don't disappear. How do you lose children? How do you get them sent to unsafe places? They're putting systems in place to make sure that never happens again. And there's also a big question also, well, you know, how do you check if these kids are being sent to safe homes? Is that better than where they came from? You tell me, right? Now, look, another interesting development, there's a new system in place that's supposedly in there to help stop illegal immigrants from voting in U.S. elections. Let me show you the announcement. This is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and they say this. U.S. Immigration and Immigration Services updated the systematic alien verification for entitlements, the SAVE program, to ensure a single, reliable source for verifying immigration status and U.S. citizenship nationwide. It says that state and local authorities can input Social Security numbers to help verify U.S. citizenship and prevent aliens from voting in American elections. Briefly on this, you know why this is such a big deal? Because this is technically also verification of, well, are you registered to vote? Are you a U.S. citizen? When it comes to Republicans wanting voter ID, the main reason they want it is not to prevent, some people from voting. It's to prevent non-American citizens from voting, and it's to prevent people from voting more than one time. This could actually work like that, at least achieve the goal of it, without having to have a technical voter ID. But back on the point, here's what they say. They say, quote, "For years, states have pleaded for tools to help identify and stop aliens from hijacking our elections," said USCIS spokesman Matthew Trageser, and added, quote, "Under the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Noem, USCIS is moving quickly to eliminate voter fraud. We expect further improvements soon and remain committed to restoring trust in American elections." Now, note this new partisanship with the security, so this new partnership, it's partisan also, this new partnership with the Social Security Administration allows cases to verify citizenship or immigration status to be created using Social Security numbers rather than a DHS identifying number, which most state and local agencies do not collect. Also, it says for the first time, agencies can submit more than one case at a time. Imagine that. They could only have one case at a time in the past, which they says can make the process more efficient. And notes this advancement comes shortly after the DHS, USCIS, and D.O.G.E, that's the Department of Government Efficiency, SAVE optimization announcement and builds on efforts to remove roadblocks to securing the country's election process by working to eliminate voter fraud. What a concept, right? Now remember, this also comes on the heels of Trump announcing new programs to possibly investigate alleged fraud. In fact, Trump is saying they want to appoint a special counsel to investigate alleged voter fraud in the 2020 elections. And they've even been releasing new information alleging that the Chinese Communist Party was actually trying to create fake driver's licenses, which they wanted to ship to the United States, and that Chinese agents on American soil were going to use these fake imported licenses to get mail-in ballots fraudulently and then vote in our elections and rig the election. Now, it came out that, again, Kash Patel released that FBI director. He said he recovered these documents. Apparently, they tried destroying that whole thing. They tried getting rid of the whole narrative. Kash released it, has now provided that to Congress. And it turns out that not only did they try covering it up, they actually intercepted during that time a large shipment of artificial fake driver's licenses coming to the U.S. from China. In other words, evidence that corroborated the claims, but they swept it all under the rug. Now, what's interesting happening now, aside from the possibility there actually might be a special counsel investigating all of this, well, when it comes to the allegations of illegal immigrants voting in our elections, we've been told that it's just not necessary. They're saying that there's not enough cases, it doesn't happen, there's never been enough fraud to swing an election. That's what we've all been told. And what's going to happen now? Well, we're going to find out. Because now they have systems in place to prevent that from happening. And that also means if it's not a problem, then it won't be a problem, right? No one's going to be affected by it. If it wasn't a problem, not a big deal. But if it is a problem, well, we're going to see it now, and it's going to be very interesting to watch. In other news, immigration agents have been getting a lot more active with deportations. They've been given a goal for around 3,000 deportations every single day. Also on that point, self-deportations are up. At least 1 million people have decided to self-deport, which is a lot given that it's not that long going on. Now, as part of the plan, though, to have the 3 deportations every single day, ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, they got access to a license plate system at the end of last month, and this could help them better locate illegal immigrants. And interestingly, soon after they got access to it, guess what happened? It's been revealed that Denver, Colorado put their whole system, the cameras, to read license plates on hold. They're saying, okay, we're going to shut that whole thing off now. The Denver Gazette said this. It said a resolution that would have added 2 years and $666,000, 666, to an existing contract between the Denver Police Department and Flock Group, Inc. for cameras that read license plates has failed. It says the unanimous decision by the Denver City Council came Monday afternoon after weeks of public outcry over concerns surrounding information sharing and possible use of data from the automated license plate readers, or ALPRS, for mass surveillance and to target illegal immigrants. Meaning they don't want them to locate illegal immigrants, so they shut the whole thing down. Now it says this. Mayor Mike Johnson asked council members to reject the contract until the city can address the concerns. Now, look briefly on all of this and what happened with ICE getting access to that network. SAN, they recently reported that, quote, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, gained indirect access to a vast network of AI-powered license plate reader cameras operated by Flock Safety. In other words, a private organization, technically, which is how it gets around the constitutional elements of this. It says, according to documents reviewed by 404 Media. Remember the way that this stuff works? Under the U.S. Constitution, there are no searches allowed, right? You're protected under the Constitution against unwarranted searches and seizures. If they want to search you, they need to have a warrant. The issue is, well, there are private organizations that collect a whole lot of data, and some of these are in legal gray areas. Some of them you give permission to in the terms of service. They can sell the data, and investigative bodies can just purchase that data and bypass the good old Constitution. On this point, you have a private organization that runs these systems, doing the work, right, kind of investigating everybody. And ICE has gotten some access to that. Now, for ICE, they can use that to locate and arrest and probably deport illegal immigrants. But that's being challenged now. But on this point, back to the issue at hand. It says this, quote, ICE has no direct agreement with Flock, but has access to the system through search requests routed via local and state law enforcement. And so, in other words, when it comes to the concerns with Denver, right, where they're saying that they don't want ICE to be able to access this, their concerns about constitutional arguments, this is the gray area on top of the gray area. So technically, police would need a warrant to do these investigations or to do that kind of work. You have a private company collecting massive amounts of this. They can do it. But ICE does have a warrant to go to this company and get access to that data. In other words, it is constitutional in that regard. They do have a warrant, but they're gaining access to just a massive system. And that massive system could help them say, okay, where is this license plate at? Where was this person last seen? Okay, this illegal immigrant lives here, that one lives there, and so on and so forth and so on. And that's important because, remember, a lot of these people, they're quote-unquote, they're illegal, but the nature of calling them undocumented is actually not right. Because a lot of these people are documented, and this is one of the funny ways the narratives have been twisted. Many of the illegal immigrants are documented. In other words, they have documents. If they came in through different programs and they've been getting, temporary protection status or other documented programs that were created for illegal immigrants, they're on the books. Some of them have been defrauding Social Security systems. They're kind of documented. Some of them have been getting government programs, access, for example, to welfare and other things like that. Some of them have done that through fraudulent means. And what the Trump administration is doing, one of the actions of the DOGE department, is they've been getting access to different bodies of records. And what they can do when they have that is they can compare the records. Okay, if they get access to the Social Security system, for example, one of the big things that certain individuals tried stopping them from doing, if they can get access to that, they can say, okay, is this person who is receiving social welfare an American citizen? Is this person reusing the same Social Security number multiple times, which they found has been happening a lot? Is there a fraudulent Social Security number? Was a fraudulent Social Security number used to vote in an election? They can use that as kind of the head of the octopus to go down all those tentacles of investigation, and that will help them, of course, locate these individuals, find them, and then deport them. Now, back to these cameras. The issue of ICE getting access to them could raise some legal arguments like we're seeing now in Denver. As I mentioned, a big one is controversy of agencies sharing personal identifiable information between agencies. This is something complicated that is hard to do in most cases because it lets you compare records from one agency with records from another. And when you can compare records, that's one of the ways you start identifying illegal immigrants. There have been a lot of pushback to try to stop that investigation from happening. But for the most part, the Trump administration has now been able to do that. Another big issue, though, is the potential problem, as I mentioned, around searches and seizures. Could this be considered a type of warrantless investigation? Well, the issue is maybe, right? Because, of course, these cameras, they do collect data on basically all of us, not just illegal immigrants. And to an extent, Americans do allow that to happen, maybe because we think it's good for our safety and it's worth the sacrifice. But if that's the case, it's already something being done on a fairly large scale with license plate scans in general. A lot of states have this. New York, for example. When it comes to even Washington, D.C., and they have cameras that automatically give you a traffic ticket if you go even a little bit over the speed limit, that's license plate scanners. Now, what the Trump administration has done is they made all those license plate scanners also illegal immigration scanners. And so we'll see if they keep them. There have also been legal arguments against some practices that have been in place for a very long time already, but until now, it hasn't really gotten that much controversy. And we'll see if that changes now that the powers could also be used to locate and deport illegal immigrants. Now, meanwhile, folks, there's a mystery afoot. Let's see if we can solve this mystery together, okay? Let's start with some data. I'm going to give you some numbers. All right, let's do the math. There's a poll, and the poll has 67% of people disagreeing, 38% approving, and 5% who are undecided. What's wrong with this poll? All right, anybody? Anyone? Let's take a minute. I'll say it again. 67%, 38%, and 5%. What's wrong with this? Okay, here's the answer. The problem is that adds up to 110%. Now you might ask, how could there be 110% of anything? Normally 100% would be everybody, right? Well, the mystery stands, and this was actually raised during recent polling about how people feel about the work of Elon Musk and the D.O.G.E investigations.
Just a point of clarification. The poll behind you, behind our ranking member, it adds up to 110%. Just wanted to clarify, is it meant to add up to 110%, or is that an error?
Do you yield?
Yeah, I do.
This is from a Quinnipiac poll that was held 2 weeks ago, and this is the data that was provided. There's a wealth of information, including information about Donald Trump's falling poll numbers, so you should take a look. Thanks.
I yield back.
The gentleman yields, and it still adds up to 110%. That's a fake poll right there.
Okay, look, being fair, maybe somebody just wrote the wrong numbers down, okay? That might have happened. We don't really know. But this is important for a key reason. The Trump administration, they've been accusing different organizations and news outlets of basically skewing poll data. They've been accusing them of releasing fake polls. And that could actually lead them to create new ways to do their own polling outside the media establishment. In fact, one of the big concerns right now that even some conservatives raise of the Trump administration is they've gone through an organization that's going to be collecting data on Americans. One way you could use that is for polling. And, effectively, if you want to see if your policies are resonating with the American people, you need polls to do it. And if the media is not trustworthy and the polling organizations, for the most part, there's some okay ones, but for the most part are not trustworthy, how do you weigh anything? The issue of fake polls is becoming an issue for government policy. And so the Trump administration is trying to find a way around that. Now, also briefly back to Iran, because there's been a lot of reporting around this lately. President Donald Trump spoke with press aboard Air Force One yesterday about the situation in Iran. And he's saying that its days of enriching uranium and trying to build nuclear weapons, they've come to an end. He also announced the new enterprises that Iran will soon transition to. Watch this.
About uranium enrichment.
They're not going to have enrichment, and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and they know that. They're going to get on to being a great trading nation. They're very good traders, and they're going to be a great trading nation, and they have a lot of oil. They're going to do well. They're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
So did they
The
promise?
last thing on Iran's mind right now is nuclear weapons.
Now, imagine that, a great trading nation. And, that actually has some pretty big implications, by the way. What do you need to trade, right? You have to have buyers and you have to sell products to buyers, right? Simple economics, right? You need someone to buy the stuff you're selling and you need to produce things to sell. And also, what do you need? You need to not have sanctions. Yeah, that's right. If you want to trade and be a great trading nation, you need to not have sanctions. What is standing in the way of Iran becoming a great trading country? They have too many sanctions. Now, why do they have sanctions? Because they've been so focused on developing nuclear weapons that they've made that the priority of getting rid of sanctions, right? They've kept the sanctions in exchange for trying to produce nuclear weapons. This is going to be interesting, though, because for Iran, now that those days are allegedly over, they may look into different types of industries. Now, as things currently stand, Iran, they trade heavily with the Chinese Communist Party, especially with oil, right? They're a big oil exporter. But because they're sanctioned, they kind of do it under the books, right? And everyone knows China buys it. In fact, Trump even Trump even told the Chinese Communist Party they can start buying Iranian oil again. It's a bit of a punch below the belt because it has other implications, meaning we know you're violating sanctions all the time. Maybe, though, Trump's statement saying Iran's going to become a great trading nation is a sign that, along with his other trade deals throughout the whole Middle East, right? Remember when Trump was meeting with other Middle Eastern leaders and they were giving him parades and jet escorts and everything else like that? Maybe he's going to offer something similar to Iran. And through these international relations, they could turn into something else. We'll see. Interesting stuff. A lot of developments, a lot to talk about. That said, let me know what you think in the comments. Let's jump into some questions. So first off, Cassandra Olympiade. You're talking about the Alligator Alcatraz. You're saying, hope there are cameras watching detainees in Alligator Alley would make for interesting reality TV should any try to escape. Look, okay, we're joking about this, but do you all remember the rumors where they were saying the Department of Homeland Security wanted to create a reality TV show where illegal immigrants try to compete for the ability to become American citizens? Now, to be fair, I don't, if you read into the actual reports, this was the reality of that proposal. There's a company that does reality TV shows, and they've been lobbying the government going back to the Obama administration. They want to create a reality TV show. I don't think it's technically illegal immigrants. It's just foreign people. And they get to compete to become American citizens. And, the story would be they travel all across the country and they get to see, historical sites and learn about American history and then do games in whatever area they're in. Maybe alligator wrestling in Florida. maybe escaping Alligator Alcatraz. I don't know. I don't know if they go that far. But they have to compete, and then whoever wins, they'll do a big thing, and the award ceremony is they're swearing in as citizens. I think it'd be an interesting TV show. Now, DHS, they said that they're not currently reviewing this, but they have gotten offered it. To be honest, I think they might consider it, just being honest. I don't think technically it would be anything life-threatening, but it is an interesting idea because it would be a reality TV show where people learn about why people want to become American citizens. On the point of Alligator Alley and Alligator Alcatraz also, I will say every day we come closer to Rome, right? During the Roman Colosseum and gladiator games, of course, you could compete also to become a Roman citizen. You had to defeat all the other migrant candidates, let's say, to the Roman Empire during those games. But one person got to become a Roman citizen. Maybe it would be something similar. I don't know. I can say again when it comes to Alligator Alcatraz. All right, let me present a scenario. You go to Home Depot, and there's a guy out front, and he looks kind of like beaten, weathered. He has that 1,000-yard stare, and he's like, "Hombre, I want to mow your lawn. Please hire me." And you have a choice. You can hire him, or there's the kid down the street from you who wants to mow your lawn, who wants to raise money to go to Harvard. You're like, ugh, right? Harvard. Who do you hire? Do you hire the guy who wants to go to Harvard, or do you hire the guy who just survived a week wrestling alligators and living in the Florida Everglades? I'd probably hire the guy who survived a week in the Florida Everglades. I would hire that guy in a heartbeat. I don't care what his immigration status is. That guy is cool by my books personally. All right, another question here, Mr. Foster 2015. You're saying calling them undocumented is neuro-linguistic programming. It really is, because it's actually funny because it's done a full 180, or it's done a full 360 at this point. We've come back to the beginning. I briefly mentioned this, so I'll just be really brief with this. The narrative, the change of language, right? It used to be that if you were an illegal immigrant, you were called an alien or an illegal alien, right? They changed illegal alien to undocumented migrant to just migrant now. And it's interesting because during the Biden administration, all of these people were not undocumented. Actually, they were almost all documented. Now, they would destroy or discard many of their documents as they came over, but as they were put, which I've showed you in my own documentaries, by the way, but once they do come over, they're documented. They were registered in systems. They did biometrics on them. You know, they documented them. They came here. They were given documented status, temporary protection status. They were given documented programs. You know, free food and housing, like the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City, right? The Roosevelt Hotel in New York City, where you had, you know, murderous, Tren de Aragua members staying. I'm not exaggerating, for example. People were killed by them. Those people were documented. They were still illegal immigrants, but they were documented. So the narrative doesn't really work here. It's kind of funny they still call them undocumented because it doesn't line up with the actual reality. James Dyson, you're saying, Josh, if someone is doing something that is apparent and vividly illegal and warrants justified because of due process, or does the illegal activity automatically void the rights of a person to be protected by a warrant? It's complicated from what I understand. I mean, maybe there's some police officers who can give us a better understanding of this. So, okay, this is where it comes down to, in my understanding. A police officer, okay, let's imagine you get stopped by police. They want to search you, right? They want to search you. What will allow them to search you? What's the difference between, let's say, all right, so let's say, for example, you're just walking down the street. A police officer grabs you and shoves his hands in your pockets and says, "What's this?" and pulls out your inhaler or something like that, right? You could call that an unwarranted search and seizure. What is the difference between that and the police officer, maybe you rob a store and then you run, and the police officer places you in handcuffs and then says, "Is there anything in your pockets that might harm me? Sharp objects, syringes, needles, drugs, whatever else?" And you say, "No, officer." And then he puts his hands in your pockets and pulls out something else. I don't know. What is the difference between these two? The first scenario, where there was no reason for this, would be considered, in my understanding, unwarranted. The second scenario, even though he did not get a warrant, would be considered legal and is the normal process when you deal with a criminal. What is the difference? The difference, in my understanding, is what you call probable cause. Police need to have probable cause to conduct a search. And if you go to court and you're brought before the judge, and the judge, there's a guy being like, "Well, he searched the trunk of my car and found all of my back pain medicine in the trunk," right? And you're an undocumented pharmacist, right? You say, "Judge, I'm an undocumented pharmacist. I had my back pain medication, which I need to smoke 3 times a day, in the trunk of my car. And I believe the officer did not have a warrant to search. There was no probable cause, and so on." What happens? Even though whatever you had in your trunk was probably illegal, the whole case can in fact be thrown out if there was no probable cause. And that's the way it works. That is the way it works. It's going to depend on the judge in some cases. You know what I mean? Don't take this as legal advice, right? Don't take this as legal advice. It's not a surefire bet, but generally speaking, that's kind of the way the law works. And so that is a big question, right? That is a big question when it comes to illegal immigrants. Is an illegal immigrant who has committed the crime of illegally entering the country, does that basically represent a violation of the law that would then that would act as probable cause for other types of searches and seizures? Many would argue yes. The big argument from conservatives basically right now is yes. Among many Democrats, the argument, I shouldn't say Democrats, among a lot of the liberal establishment, the answer is no. I should be clear that when it comes to illegal immigration, it's not as partisan as people might believe, like among voters. Politically, it's very partisan, but among voters, based on polling, however accurate you think it is, it's not as polarized actually. It's more so in terms of people wanting to have them deported. In fact, even a lot of registered Democrats want mass deportations. It's interesting. And so, this would be a legal interpretation, an interpretation of the law. But in my understanding, the pre-existing crime of illegally entering the United States would work as probable cause for a search and seizure, in my understanding. But again, you would probably have to watch that get challenged. I guarantee you, if an officer tried making that argument, it would probably go to the Supreme Court, right? Yerba mate, good name. It's one of my favorite drinks, by the way. I love yerba mate. You're saying, can you tell Iran now you can charge higher rate for your oil you charge for China since no sanctions? Well, that is an interesting point, actually. So this is kind of, there are two global economic orders. There's the American economic order and there's the Chinese Communist Party economic order. The American economic order is your free market capitalism, good old communism-free capitalism, right? Maybe a little bit of cronyism in there, maybe a little bit, but for the most part, free market capitalism, okay? That's the American model for the global economy. Fair trade, except against Americans because we always trade at a loss. Fair trade for most people. And again, a lot of business deals and so on. You can charge a lot of money, especially if you're trading with Americans because we pay it for some reason. And, free markets. You can gain access to just about everything. The problem with a lot of countries is if you decide that you just really want to make nuclear weapons or really want to throw your citizens in the gulag and you just can't help yourself and you do it, you might get sanctioned by the United States. You might get sanctioned. And if you get sanctioned, you get thrown in the timeout corner. Now, the problem with that is normally the timeout corner where you're not allowed to engage in free market capitalism, right? You get sanctioned. The purpose of this is to make you change your policies. The United States places sanctions on Iran to try to get them to stop making nuclear weapons, unless a certain president decides to send them pallets of cash and then lets them do it, or unlocks billions of dollars of sanctions and they restart global terrorism. Who would do such a thing? They get put in the timeout corner and they're saying, okay, now's your chance. Please change your policies. With North Korea, that's the case. With Russia, that's the case. Russia is sanctioned, of course, because, we want them to end the war with Ukraine, right? That's the purpose of the sanctions. Now, the problem with that only works if there's no alternative. And the problem we have with the alternative global economy, the Chinese Communist Party has manufactured the alternative. And so the CCP has created an alternative global economy to the United States that basically works with all the people in the timeout corner. So they trade heavily with North Korea, they trade heavily with Iran, they trade heavily with Russia, they trade heavily with Venezuela. They trade heavily with the countries that are on the naughty list of the United States, right? And so what happens with this, now the CCP, in addition to creating this, also just massively takes advantage of all of these countries. Like, it squeezes them. When it buys oil from Russia, it pays the lowest amount possible. Like, Russia is just getting drained by the Chinese Communist Party. Same with Iran. When they ship oil to China, they're just getting drained by them. And why is that? It's because the CCP is not coming in as a friend. They're saying, we're your only option. That's what they're saying. We're your only option. You got nobody else to sell to. Supply and demand, and I'm the only demander. They control the market. And so they just full on take advantage of them, right? Now, what's going to be interesting, I don't know why these countries don't just be like, wait a minute, you're massively ripping me off. And, you know, I could just change this little policy and get access to like a better market and make a lot of money. Iran could be as rich as like Qatar or Saudi Arabia or other countries, and they just kind of choose not to because they're so focused on nuclear weapons, or were until now. If they drop those policies and do get the ability to trade on the global free market, and they are one of the larger oil producers, as Yerba Mate said in the chat, yeah, they can charge a lot more for oil. They can make a lot of money on oil. They might not even need like other economic like sectors. They could make a lot of money with that. And it would be bad for the CCP, but good for everybody else, right? Ashley from California, you're saying Internet plus Patriot Act equals illusion of privacy, but not actual privacy. Yeah, you know, I've gone back and forth with the nature of the Internet. Right? The Internet has massively changed our lives. Look, I guess maybe I sound like an old guy. I remember life before the Internet. And while I do recognize the Internet has brought many great things, it has also brought many terrible things. I don't think it has made people closer. I think, in a weird way, being more connected has made people more distant. People are locked in their houses. You know, men don't really come out and date anymore. It made people kind of weird. Let's just put it that way. It made people more antisocial in a weird way. And the other side of it is it created a massive form of surveillance. Everything you do is now surveilled. The nature of the Internet and the Internet of Things, every device has various sensors. The sensors can pick up audio, video, GPS location. You know, if you wear like a Fitbit, it's heart monitoring and health data and everything else. We willingly submit all of this. Your browser history, whatever horrors they might entail, your browser history, all of that is actually documented. Just on a very basic level, every website you visit is documented by your internet service provider, your ISP. They document it. All of it is recorded. If you work in a big business and you have an IT department, every website visited, every bit of data, everything on your device that you conduct on the company's internet service is being monitored and at least viewable by the IT department. You can imagine the things they see and deal with. You wonder why they don't talk to any of you, right? They watch all of it. They know all of it. And, you know, the problem you have with this is, you know, on the business level, it makes sense to an extent, right? Businesses, if they want to have a free service, they have to make money somehow. And so they sell this to advertisers, and there's a huge advertising business. Fine, right? I think a lot of us did give permissions to a lot of services because we believe that the service offered is worth the cost of privacy. The problem you then have is when you have monitoring in place. And I'm not even just talking about your own government, I'm talking about even foreign governments. The ability of government agencies, foreign and domestic, to monitor you because they can buy the data, or they can have police warrants to access the data, or other things like that. The amount of data they get is massive. It's incredible. They can have everything on you. In fact, if anybody has watched the way current court cases work, what is the evidence now submitted in a court case? Text messages, the location of your phone at the time of the crime, where they can say, were you present there? Your phone was at the scene of the crime at the time of the incident took place. You're a suspect. Even if you were not guilty, you might be a suspect if your phone was located there. What were you saying on the internet? What were you saying in private text messages? What were you saying in email? What were you looking for on the internet? If you decide to rob a Walmart at 5 p.m. and at 3 p.m. you were looking up Reddit tips on how to rob a Walmart, that's going to act as evidence against you. You know, And look, in Western societies, in the United States, we can say, okay, like, they mostly just use this to capture like actual criminals. In some countries, it's not like that. In some countries, it can be, do you believe in democracy? Were you chatting with somebody about not wearing your hijab when you walk down the street or something like that? That kind of stuff can be looked at. And things that we would consider basic freedoms can be undermined by the evidence you have created just by living your life. And as we've gone down this road of having more and more of our lives on the internet, it basically means that our entire lives are viewable, documented, traceable, and can and will be used against you in a court of law. We've done that to ourselves. Now, is that a good thing or bad thing? I'd rather go back. I can tell you life was not so bad before the internet. I'd say it was better, actually. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad we have it because I can do this show, right? But hey, we're on cable too, so maybe we don't need it. But I do think life was better before it. On the other side of it too, artificial intelligence has supercharged this. AI has supercharged this because, you can collect every bit of data in the world and it's not going to be of much use because it's too much data for any human being to ever look through. AI gives the ability to sort it and to flag it. And that's when you start getting into pre-crime. Maybe like, this is, okay, for example, this is one of the concerns right now with the IRS. And this has been raised by a lot of Republicans, by the way. There's a concern that the IRS is using artificial intelligence to automatically flag potential violations of IRS, laws. And this means that you as just a regular guy, if you just file something wrong, it used to be they were kind of lenient a little bit, but beneath a certain threshold, they were maybe a bit lenient. They're now extremely not lenient. Every grain of sand is problematic. One drop above anything, there's no leeway. It's the same. It's the same thing as I mentioned with like traffic cameras in Washington D.C. Has anyone driven in Washington D.C.? And they have whole massive areas where almost every red light has a traffic camera, the speed camera. They have speed cameras, and so, normally you can go 5 above, the speed limit, and it's not an issue. If you go 6 above, you're going to get a ticket. 1 drop above, you're getting a ticket. Now, police officers, they might be lenient. They'll take a lot of other things into consideration. They might not give you a ticket if you're going 6 above, unless they're having a bad day, they're probably not going to give you a ticket. But that speeding camera will. And so we're creating a type of automatic law enforcement through minor violations. It is a rigid, no forgiveness type system, and one that just monitors everything. And I don't really know if people are going to be able to live comfortably with that kind of situation. And everything else aside, there's even the whole social dynamic of cancel culture and everything else where maybe 20 years ago you had a bad day and you wrote something you shouldn't have written on Facebook. And you forgot you wrote it. Maybe you had a few too many drinks that night. Maybe you got in an argument with a friend. You wrote something on Facebook. You forgot about it. And 20 years later, you become the focus of some, like business dispute, or maybe you get someone mad at you and they dig up your old social media posts and then plaster it everywhere. And next thing you know, you have journalists calling your phone and calling you a racist or Nazi or homophobe, or who knows what labels they'll come up with in the future. Maybe in the future, things we consider now to be normal will be considered to be like, socially criminal. Cancel culture will change and come after you. You never know how it's going to change. In case in point, a lot of things people are being canceled for right now were normal 20 years ago, right? That is also what you've created, where you've documented your life. You've documented your opinions. You've documented your communications. You've documented everything. And you've also created the ability for all of that to be used against you in the future, unfortunately. And so, yeah, it is an issue, I think. We have created a very complicated situation for ourselves through this system of mass monitoring, which the internet does represent. Denise B., you're saying, although I'm glad he is involved, why is RFK Jr. in the search for the missing children versus the FBI? It's because it's one of the responsibilities of HHS, what's Housing and Human Services. I believe the FBI is also investigating. I know Dan Bongino, he's been talking about searching for the missing kids. But the program of resettling a lot of the migrant children, a lot of that went through HHS, Housing and Human Services. And so that's why RFK Jr. is involved with that. They've basically been reviewing the protocols that were in place, the documentation in place, and what was happening. And because it went through their agency, they're also making some efforts, I believe, to try to locate the kids. And they're having problems with that. So that's why RFK Jr. is dealing with that, in my understanding. All right, everyone, that said, it is Wednesday. I'll see you again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Let me know what you think in the chat. I mean, I don't know. Do you think that the sacrifice of what we've gotten with the internet is worth it? Do you think the ability to have everything at your fingertips instead of going to a library or whatever else is worth the sacrifice of privacy? Would you want to go back to maybe, I don't know, 1980 or 90, what was it, like 95, when only the weird kid in the computer lab was the one who liked to browse the internet in their free time? Would you want to go back? Is it worth the sacrifice of privacy to have what we've gotten? Let me know. I'm curious what you all think. That said, I will see you all tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget to like this video. Please share it. And I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you so much as always. Please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.